Hi everyone, here we are, chapter 14, Power, Influence, and Leadership, from becoming a manager to becoming a leader. So I always think this leadership is a really interesting chapter and topic. We certainly are faced with issues of leadership all the time, and I know everyone has an opinion. When you're the leader, everyone's got an opinion of you. So let's get going. Okay, leadership. It's the ability to influence employees to voluntarily pursue goals. So not everyone necessarily is meant to be a leader, not necessarily is suited to be a good leader, but people who show that evidence shows that people who can be trained to be more effective leaders. So there's a lot of management development that goes on. But it's important to understand the difference between leadership and power. So leadership is the ability to influence employees to voluntarily pursue organizational goals. Personalized power is power that you use to help yourself. Socialized power is power that you use to help others. So there's 5 sources of power. Legitimate power, it's from their formal position. Reward power is if you have the ability to give rewards to people. Coercive power is if you have the ability to punish others. Expert power is if you have some sort of specialized information or expertise, say in engineering, accounting, finance, whatever it may be. And then referent power is basically because people like you. You know, if people like you, they tend to listen to you. Okay, so common influence tactics. There are soft tactics and hard tactics, and we are going to just go through them kind of quickly here. Rational persuasion is convincing someone by using logic, reason, or facts. Inspirational appeals is building enthusiasm or confidence by appealing to emotions, ideals, or values. Consultation is getting others to participate in a decision or change. You just want to make sure if you get them to participate that you actually listen to some of their advice. Ingratiating tactics are, acting humble or friendly before making a request. Basically, brown-nosing to a certain extent. Personal appeals is, referring to friendship and loyalty when making a request. And the hard tactics are reminding someone of past favors or offering to make a trade. Coalition tactics are getting others to support your effort, and then you individually go and talk to people and say, well, you help me out with this plan I have. So you build a coalition of people. Pressure tactics is using demands, threats, or intimidation. And then legitimating tactics is basing a request on implied support from superiors or on rules or policies. Say, well, that's what the boss wants, so that's what the rule book says, so that's what we got to do. So you want to make sure what are the best tactics to come. Of course, rational persuasion, consultation, collaboration, and inspirational appeals are the most effective, and those, of course, are the soft tactics. So better go soft than hard. You have to be authentic to your values and your beliefs. You have to consult with people rather than just say this is what it's going to be. Glad handing, or that idea of ingratiation, is not necessarily a good long-term strategy. You should show some level of flattery and agreement, and learn how to influence. So influence tactics can be taught and learned. In a sense, remember we talked about the 360-degree feedback when we talked about human resources, and managers who received 360-degree feedback on 2 occasions regarding their influence tactics showed an increased use of core influence values. Okay, so moving on here. And again, just as like we talked about in the previous chapter with conflict, this idea of influencing others can be something that you can apply in your personal life as well as your work life. Okay, so this is just really just an overview of what we're going to learn in this chapter, and it presents an integrated model of leadership. Starting at the far right of the model, you can see that leadership effectiveness is the outcome we want to explain. And the center of the model shows this outcome is influenced by 4 types of leadership behavior: task-oriented, relationship-oriented, passive, and transformational leadership. And in turn, our ability to effectively engage in these leader behaviors is affected by traits, gender, and leadership skills, which are on the left side of the model. Just to give you an idea of what we're going to talk about. Okay, so trait approaches to leadership. Trait plays a central role in how we perceive leaders, and they ultimately affect leadership effectiveness. This is why researchers have attempted to identify a more complete list of traits that differentiate leaders from followers. And this table, this is right from the book, shows an expanded list of both positive and negative interpersonal attributes that are often found in leaders. So there's positive and things that can be positive or negative. Remember, we see that many of these words we've seen before, terms we've seen before. Okay, so there are some dark side traits. Narcissism is only, having a self-centered perspective, feeling that you're superior to others, and you just want personal power and glory. Machiavellianism, it's a cynical view of human nature and condones opportunistic and unethical ways of manipulating people. So it's, basically the idea of Machiavellianism that you would, walk over anybody to get what you want, not a way to win friends. And psychopathy is characterized by a lack of concern for others. It's impulsive behavior, a lack of remorse when your actions harm others. Those are very negative, dark traits. So some examples of positive and negative traits you can go through. Compares Tom's, the shoe company Tom's, to a pharmaceutical company. Just you can go through and read them. That's from the book as well. Okay, so this is maybe a little bit of a controversial topic for some people, but there is all sorts of research about that that's generally speaking about women in leadership, the difference between women and leadership, and oftentimes they say that women are better leaders because of this first one. Women are relationship leaders. Women say we, not I. They have more participative style, whereas men is much more autocratic style. Females usually have more group cohesion and cooperation and participative communication. And as I said, there's been lots of research that, generally speaking, people rate women executives as more effective than men. Men rated themselves as more effective than women evaluated themselves. So that's just something to think about. Lots of research about that. Okay, so 4 basic skills for leaders. There are, what leaders need: cognitive abilities, interpersonal skills, business skills, and strategic skills. So, again, why are they important? You need to be able to think. You need to be able to get along with other people. You need to be able to understand business and manage a business, and you need to be able to think strategically so that you can reach the company's goals. Okay, so we've been talking about trait theories, and they offer essentially 4 conclusions: that we can't ignore the implication of leadership traits, that traits play a central role in the way we perceive leaders, and they do ultimately affect leadership effectiveness. Positive and dark triad traits suggest the qualities you should cultivate and avoid if you want to assume leadership role in the future. Organizations may want to include personality and trait assessments in their selection and evaluation process. You might want to be a little bit careful about that, but there are things that you can learn information from that. And then a global mindset as more companies expand their operations internationally, it's really important for people to think globally, not just locally. Okay, so some behavioral approaches to leadership, divided essentially into 4 categories: task-oriented behavior, relationship-oriented behavior, passive behavior, and transformational behavior. But so maybe not what's important to know, not necessarily leaders' personality traits, but rather their patterns of behavior. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that, go through them one by one. Task-oriented leader behaviors: planning, clarifying, monitoring, and problem solving. So in particular, initiating structural leadership and transactional leadership. We're going to talk about that. It's very important. So Initiating structured leadership organizes and defines what employees should be doing to maximize output, and transactional leadership clarifies employees' roles and task requirements and provides rewards and punishments contingent on performance. So it's task. Relationship-oriented behaviors, primarily concerned with interactions, which can be very good. If you spend too much time concerned about employees and not enough about tasks, that's a little bit of a problem. But emphasis on relationship-oriented leadership is enhancing employee skills and creating positive work relationships among coworkers and between the leader and the followers. So oftentimes leaders like this act as mentors, providing career advice, giving employees assignments that will broaden their skills, and empowering them to make their own decisions. So it's consideration, empowering leadership, ethical leadership, and servant leadership. We're going to talk about them. So consideration is concerned with people's needs and desires. And it's an important type of behavior to use in addition to task leadership because it promotes social interactions and identification with the team and leader. Considerate leader behavior has a moderately strong positive relationship with measures of leadership effectiveness. So empowering for leadership represents the extent to which a leader creates perceptions of psychological empowerment in others. So how is it that, do people feel empowered with this leader? And then psychological empowerment is the belief that they have control over their work. This idea that they have an internal locus of control. Is there, can they find meaning in their work? Do they feel that they can, progress? Okay, next, ethical leadership, certainly a hot topic these days. It's clearly driven by personal factors related to our beliefs and values. It also has a reciprocal relationship with an organization's culture and climate. So in other words, an ethical culture and climate promotes ethical leadership, and ethical leadership in turn promotes an ethical culture and climate. So such leadership is positively related to employee job satisfaction, organizational commitment, organizational citizenship behavior, motivation, and task performance. It's also negatively associated with job stress, counterproductive work behavior, and intentions to quit. And it appears that ethical leadership has many positive benefits. Certainly, we want to make sure that we are working in an ethical environment and that we are behaving ethically in our larger social area. Okay, servant leadership is somewhat a new trend that we talk about. It's not necessarily a quick fix approach to leadership, rather it's a long-term approach to life and work. And we talk about different characteristics of servant leadership are listed. So the idea of the servant leader is that they are there to serve their workers. The workers are not there to serve them. So kind of like what we talked about with Theory Y, and also with Hertzberg's motivation factors, that it's the organization that needs to give the employees opportunity to achieve their goals. And unless the organization or the leader gives those people the opportunity to achieve their goals, then they're not going to be happy. Okay, passive leadership. Essentially, there's no leadership skills, or laissez-faire, which is people don't necessarily take any responsibility for leadership. They just sort of let the employees run wild. So there's also this idea of management by exception, that managers don't intervene until problems are brought to their attention or until the problems become serious enough to demand action, which is very, very bad. They just kind of let things play out. It's also, when we talked about conflict, you could also say to a certain extent it's how people deal with conflict. It's by avoidance, not healthy. So we'll talk about just quickly practical implications of behavioral approaches that people learn from the top down. People take clues. So a leader's behavior is more important than their traits. And it's important to train managers on the various forms of task and relationship leadership that, people, if they see what people model behavior. And so it's the leader's responsibility to model good behavior. And there's no one best style of leadership. It depends upon what the context is, what's going on at the time in the environment, what the industry is, that kind of thing. So that brings us to situational approaches. Essentially, It depends upon what's happening at the time. Again, internally, externally, what's happening. So we're going to talk about contingency and path goal leadership. Contingency leadership model, it was developed by Fiedler, and it's the oldest model of contingency approach to leadership. It was just established in 1951. Contingency leader model determines if a leader's style is task-oriented or relationship-oriented, and if that style is effective for the situation at hand. So you want to know, that's one thing you might want to ask yourself, is it, are you task or personality or person? Okay, so 3 dimensions of situational control. So what is going on with the relationship between the leader and the member at the time? How easy are the tasks understood and how well organized are they? And how much power a leader has to make work assignments and reward and punish. So does the leader have control over actually what is going on in the organization? So here we are with yet another chart. Again, you can take a look at that. It's from the book. So neither leadership style is effective all the time, and Fiedler's research concludes, although each is right in certain situations. So when task style is best, the task-oriented style works best in either high control or low control situations. Examples of high control situations, suppose you are supervising parking control officers, ticketing cars parked illegally in expired meter zones, bus zones, and the like. So you have higher leader-member relations because your subordinates are highly supportive of you, and high task structure because their jobs are clearly defined. And you also have high position control because you have complete authority to evaluate their performance and dole out punishment and rewards. So thus a task-oriented style would be best. And in conflict, or in contrast to that, is the relationship-oriented style. Works best when situations for moderate control. Suppose you're working in a government job, supervising a group of firefighters fighting wildfires. You might have low leader-member relations if you are promoted over the others in the group, but high task structure because the job is fairly well defined. So you might have low position power because the rigidity of the civil service job prohibits you from doing much in the way of rewarding and punishing. So thus, in this moderate control situation, relationship-oriented leadership would be the most effective. Depending upon how much power you have over them. Okay, path goal leadership model. It's this idea that the effective leader increases employees' motivation by clarifying the paths or behavior that will help them achieve their goals. So things are very clear, and there's no ambiguity. So there's also contingency factors or variables. The employee characteristics and environmental factors cause some leadership behaviors to be more effective than others. So again, we're going to take a quick look here. So 2 contingency factors or variables, employee characteristics and environmental factors, cause some leadership behaviors to be more effective than others. So the 5 employee characteristics are locus of control, task ability, need for achievement, experience, and need for path goal clarity. Environmental factors, that might be what's the task structure? Is it independent versus interdependent tasks, and work group dynamics? So leader behaviors, originally House proposed that there were 4 leader behaviors or leadership styles. Directive, here's what's expected of you and here's how to do it. Supportive, I want things to be pleasant since everyone's about equal here. Participative, I want your suggestions in order to help me make decisions. And achievement-oriented, I'm confident you can accomplish the following great things. So the revised theory goes through and explains these things from left to right. So how do you apply situational theories? First, you want to identify the goal or goals you want to achieve. Next, you want to identify the specific types of behaviors that may be appropriate for the situation at hand. And then a set of potential contingency factors to consider, but there may be other practical considerations that you might want to look in depending upon what the situation is going on. And then Use your knowledge about power and influence to find the best match between your leadership styles and the behaviors and situation at hand. And then finally, managers can use guidelines from either contingency theory or path goal theory, change the person in the leadership role, or change his or her behavior. And what's going on? What's the best match? So transformational leadership. Transformational leadership is this idea that someone comes in and really just completely revamps the organization. So, but what it has to be important that people are pursuing the organizational goals over their own personal goals, and in this, so essentially, transformational leaders engender trust, seek to develop leadership in others, exhibit self-sacrifice, and serve as moral agents, focusing themselves and followers on objectives that transcend the more immediate needs of the work group. Whereas that's a transformational leader. A transactional leader may try to get people to do ordinary things. Transformational leaders encourage their people to do exceptional things. Significantly higher levels of intrinsic motivation, trust, commitment, and loyalty that can produce significant organizational change and results. So there are definitely some famous examples of transformational leaders: Dr. Martin Luther King, Nelson Mandela, Oprah Winfrey, Winston Churchill, Steve Jobs. People that these are really exceptional leader. So behaviors of transformational leadership. Let me share a vision that transcends all. So Martin Luther King had a vision, a dream, as he put it, of racial equality. Cindy Leitner, founder of Mothers Against Drunk Driving, had a vision of getting rid of alcohol-related car crashes. Apple Computers, Steve Jobs had a vision of developing an insanely great, quote-unquote, desktop computer, and to really make this something, an icon almost. So transformational leaderships, generally speaking, have charisma. That's a form of interpersonal attraction that inspires acceptance and support. So that's that whole idea of having a transformational leader usually has, like we talked about, power and influence, and one of them was this idea of people who are likable have more influence. Okay. Implications of transformational leadership for managers, it can be very positive because it would hopefully improve results for both individuals and groups. It can be used for employees at all levels, but it's very important, that does require ethical leaders. Okay, so what are some ways that what are some things leaders can do to make sure that they promote an ethical environment? And one is employ a code of conducts. Often, most large organizations have a code of conduct that what's expected of people. Choose the right people, so make sure that people who you hire people who display ethical behavior. Make performance expectations reflect employee treatment. So develop performance expectations around the treatment of employees that so that employees come first, and how employees are treated is a priority. Emphasize the value of diversity and reward high moral conduct. So again, you get the behavior you reward. All right, so that wraps it up for chapter 14, Power, Influence, and Leadership. Thanks.